Welcome to the Wordy Pair Podcast, your go-to hub for all things writing, world building, and the occasional dive into the weird and wonderful world of fiction. We're breaking down the barriers between you and your next great story. Whether you're a seasoned scribe or just scribbling your first sentences, we've got something for you. We'll be discussing everything from crafting compelling characters to dissecting the good, the bad, and the downright bizarre in the world of fiction. Okay, this script says you guys are eccentric. Isn't that just a 3-syllable word for weird? No offense. So, whether you're in need of inspiration, a good laugh, or just a couple of weirdos to keep you company on your writing journey, you're in the right place. Thanks for tuning in to the Wordy Pair Podcast.
Hello and welcome. This is the Wordy Pair. We are going to be talking about something a little unusual today. Basically, we're going to be talking about there's a conspiracy theory called the empty internet theory, and we're going to be talking about that from the perspective of writing and from the perspective of the parts of it that seem to be somewhat true. There's elements of it that do describe reality, so we're going to talk a little bit about that. As always, I'm Rudy.
And I'm Justin.
And we'll just get started. So maybe you should give us a little bit of background on what this so-called empty internet theory is, and then we can springboard off of that.
Okay, empty internet theory, or dead internet theory. Imagine a vast, vast wasteland in which everything you thought you knew about the world is actually just a bunch of robots sitting on benches, whispering sweet nothings in your ear. Dead internet theory is the conspiracy theory that the internet has actually been dead for, I think it's like a decade now that the theory is claiming.
Okay.
That everything on the internet is just bots, and websites are just automatically generated things, or they're either defunct websites or they're websites that are generated by bots and maintained by bots. All of your email is bots. And as you're listening to this, you can probably in your own head, as a human being who has used the internet, kind of understand how this theory could come about.
Sure.
But we're not going to look at it in terms of...
Well, I mean, it's obvious that the theory is not true. Like, you're a person and I'm a person, and we both know each other in real life, and we talk on the internet a lot. The same is true of a lot of the people that I know on, say, Discord. I have a lot of friends on Discord that I've met in real life, and I talk with them on Discord because it's a useful platform. But there is an element of this where interaction with people that you don't know in real life is often very hit or miss, in the sense that they can appear and vanish at strange times. They have weird appearances sometimes that make things look like they might be bot-like in certain ways. So this is, one of those things is it's difficult to tell whether someone's a bot, online sometimes, if you've never met them in person. But at the same time, you hope that most of the people that you're talking to are not bots. And of course, if you're on any social media platform, you're going to get probably some replies or posts, in your timeline that are clearly by bots. So the bot problem is not a zero problem, but it's not 100% clearly.
Yeah, and someone hardcore into dead internet theory, one of the hardcore conspiracists would say that, you and I could just be bots talking to each other.
Yeah, but that's solecism, and that doesn't really mean anything. That's not a very fruitful philosophy.
Well, it's just to illustrate the idea that yes, there is this theory that people believe that it could be as far-reaching as you listening to us now is just you listening to automated things talking to each other on the internet and providing content, which, the argument might be made that, but they don't sound like bots, but there's people within the field of this conspiracy theory that think that the technology is actually much further along than we believe. So we're putting all of that aside. What we're
Yeah.
actually going to talk about is parts of the internet which, for many purposes, just feel dead. Whether or not it's part of some grand conspiracy, it's just... what I mean by that is, as a writer, you have a website, and your website has your content in it, but you find that it doesn't matter, that you've been maintaining it forever, and really everything happens on Twitter and Facebook, and everything is found through Google searches that often yield the same results no matter how you try to type information in.
Right.
So as a writer, and let's jump back about 15 years ago, even 10 to some degree, but 15 years ago, good advice would have been, as a writer, to have your own personal website. Maybe have some graphics with your book covers, maybe have some of the samples of stuff you've written, or maybe even have a blog site with like full-length things you've written.
Yeah.
Maybe you don't publish in print or digitally, or like through Amazon or anything. Maybe you just publish on a blog. You're just a blogger, which is still writing.
Well, so let me just kind of sidestep a little bit here, but like this is one of those things that used to be a way to get organic traffic. There used to be a lot more wandering on the internet. There used to be a lot more, hey, here's a blog that has 15 other blogs on its sidebar. You can check any one of them, and you can kind of sidestep your way around the internet. You know, here's a Yahoo result or something that isn't the same as the Google result, so maybe I'll check this out. And, you know, that kind of organic traffic appears to have almost entirely migrated to the main, say, 3 or 4 social media sites and their wholly owned subsidiaries. We're talking Twitter, we're talking Facebook, we're talking Instagram, we're talking stuff like that.
Yeah, so the Wild West days of the internet are pretty much long gone.
Unfortunately.
And you know, what you're talking about is you've got to go all the way back to practically 2005 to get to the point where it's like you find a website in a Yahoo search or an Alta Vista search or an Ask Jeeves search, and then you go to that website, and that website has links to other sites that the person that made that site also enjoys and wants to share with you.
Yeah.
You see a lot less of that nowadays. Like a lot of times when you go to sites with links in it, unless it's an affiliate link for something, they're usually not taking you off of their own website.
Well, they'll often take you to one of the big 4.
Yeah. They're either taking you to their Twitter page or they're taking you to an affiliate
their Amazon
link
page.
It's always, and there's not necessarily a problem with that, but the point is that the ability to find an obscure website has really diminished because Google operates on algorithms that favor certain things that often are difficult to acquire depending on what kind of content you produce.
Yeah.
Most people are using Google at this point. There's other search engines, but even those are... I mean,
they give similar
engines...
results to Google, just without so much of the... Because algorithmically, there's 2 elements to the Google algorithm, right? One is popularity, and the other one is Google's particular, political bias.
Yeah.
And there are websites that will... Not even necessarily Google's political bias, but Google's desire to shunt you towards sites that have a similar political bias to what you've already demonstrated. And so a lot of these other search engines have popped up with the goal of getting rid of that, we're going to show you things that we think that you're going to agree with bias, but the algorithmic, we're going to show you things that are popular bias is still very strong on those new search engines.
Yeah, and social media has changed the landscape a lot for certain content. So
right.
It used to be if you were a relatively unknown, say, webcomic, it would, people might come across your personal webpage or your personal blog, and you might get linked to by people who are like, oh, I found that pretty entertaining. But nowadays, everyone's putting their content up on Twitter because nobody's going to their pages. Oftentimes, even if you're linking to your page, someone's just looking at the comic you posted, and they're not really going to your page after that. And it's kind of like it's a blunt, double-edged sword, because you put your content up on Twitter for free and you're already lost in the mix of Twitter. And it's almost like you don't know who's going to see it and if they're going to care. And if they happen to, you're still not getting anyone going directly to your website unless you use a lot of marketing funneling tricks, which is a thing. But then you have a website that they have to go to. It's a lot harder to keep people's attention in a world where they consume 50 comics a day on Twitter.
Yeah.
It's
not just that too. Like there's an element where Twitter now algorithmically wants you to keep people on Twitter. And so Twitter now discourages links to sites outside of Twitter. That means that any attempt that you make to bring people to your own website is necessarily going to hurt you in the Twitter algorithm, which is a little bit, which makes sense from Twitter's perspective, but also makes it much more difficult for people who are doing things that aren't easily monetizable on Twitter to use Twitter.
Yeah, and it's pretty obvious to a lot of people that, you can get lost in the shuffle on Twitter quickly. And when you look at the tricks you have to do, like there's a lot of tricks that you can do to get people to look at your content or to migrate towards, following you on Twitter. 90% of those tricks I do not like on principle, and so I don't do them, even though I know they will work. Kind of like it's actually, studies show that having a pop-up to get people to join your email list is an effective method, but I could never bring myself to have a pop-up on my website because I don't want anyone that's looking at my stuff to have to click a pop-up out of their way when they're looking at it. It's just like, this is something for you to enjoy with no distractions. That is my philosophy. And I have yet to cave to the alternative, even though every instinct tells me that I should, and every study tells me that I should. Because I'm hoping one day that the internet changes in a way in which people just want to be able to get the things they need without all the distraction. I don't think we're heading in that direction.
No.
Twitter is a good example. Like you said, they want you to, more and more Facebook, Twitter, all of these companies who used to thrive on people creating links to other places. They want you to stay now because they want your eyeballs on their page. They want to be able to put advertisers in front of you, and they want to be able to sell you their own services, most of which are things that you didn't pay for 10, 15 years ago anyway.
Right.
I mean, as an example, I tried out recently YouTube Premium. I think it's $15 a month, and the only real benefit I saw from it, apart from some of the nice things like, if you watch someone's live stream, they get like some of the funds of YouTube go to them in lieu of the advertising that you don't see. So like a little bit of what you pay goes to content creators. But I bet it's a very minuscule amount anyway. And the only real benefit I noticed from using it is that all ads, with an exception I'll get to, but all ads are gone. So you don't get things popping up in the middle of a video, which you can already block with ad blockers anyway, despite YouTube trying to prevent that. But you don't get things popping up. You don't get the ads at the beginning or end of videos either. And you can watch YouTube. You can listen to YouTube when you say turn off your phone screen. It will keep playing, so you can actually put in like earphones and listen to a YouTube video on the go. Now that is the commercials. You used to not have that problem 15 years ago. You could argue that the quality of content is higher these days, and it would be an argument, but you could argue that. However, the listening thing, I remember being able to listen to YouTube on my old phone back in 2009 with the phone off with no trouble, and now it's $15 a month to do that. So this is what these services want. They want you in their presence paying for their stuff. They want advertisers to be in front of your face if you're not paying for their stuff. And they're doing everything they can to make sure that happens. And since they have what isn't quite a captive audience, but is essentially, a wrangled audience, they have made it so that, like, I don't know why I'm still paying $9.99 a month for my personal website, to be honest. It's not just that nobody else goes there. I don't go there. I haven't looked at my personal site in forever. It's just there. And actually, I took it down a while ago, so there's not even anything up there. I'm just paying for it, wondering if I should keep it to do anything with. I think a lot of websites have gone that way. You know, like you have a blog site, right? So
yeah, that's right.
So like you probably get a little bit more traffic than I would get with just having a website, because is it a Google blog site?
It's
Blogspot?
It's a Blogspot, yeah.
I think Google owns
That's
Blogspot.
Google. It's Google based, yeah.
So like you might like get slightly better traffic than I would get just having a website, but even Google's own blogs are preempted by Google saying, no, this is what we want to appear in our searches for this kind of content.
Yeah.
So no matter what you do, you're being redirected to a lot of the same things when you use Google now. And you're also in a situation where you put something up on Twitter, people see that and the other 10 people that well, I'm going to say 10 just for sake of ease, but let's be realistic here. Like 1,000 people that they follow, they're seeing you and 10 other people at a time, and they're not spending a significant amount of time on each individual person. And I'm including comic writers as writers, but from a strictly literary viewpoint, if you're not doing drawings, if you're not making comics, if you're just writing, think about how much harder it is on Twitter, which is the place where you're going to get most people looking at your stuff. Think how hard it is to get them to look at just text versus if you have an image for something, which means that as a writer, you do have to lose a bit of writing time trying to put together or trying to find someone to make images for you to use on Twitter to draw eyeballs to posts that you make. And you know, that in itself is another thing. Like most of the writing I've done in my life, I did for fun, and I would put out for free so that, you know, someone might be able to get some enjoyment out of it. I feel like I am completely dwarfed by people who have the upper hand using various marketing skills and techniques to actually sell things. Like people that sell things manage to get more people looking at things than people who put things out for free now, because you can't just make things to entertain people on the internet anymore. There was a time where people would make comics and they would be free, and sure, you might have your little advertising banner at the top of your page, but the point was you could have a website that could become incredibly popular and people would go there, and so advertisers would want to pay you to put a banner on your website. Whereas now you could make an incredibly entertaining webcomic. If you're not on Twitter, nobody's seeing you. And if you are on Twitter, even a very, very entertaining comic could get lost in the shuffle of things between, you know, there's mundane things out there that do phenomenally better than very, very good comics just because people are pouring tons of money into advertising for them. Yeah. And, you know, sometimes I wonder about some people do get good returns on that. Some people do make their money back. But I also feel like I've seen a lot, especially in terms of like a lot of the media companies that were funded by venture capital and are now going out of business. You know, they benefited a lot from being able to just throw money at advertising and getting people to see their content. But the people didn't stick around because the content wasn't good. And I think that eventually something will have to happen where, you know, people are going to start moving towards the people who are genuinely creating worthwhile content. And there just isn't going to be enough money for people to waste on advertising mediocre at some point. It seems like a lot of that money has dried up.
Interesting.
Now, that's just like a generalization of my thoughts on the subject. So, what does this mean in terms of being a writer? Like what can
what it means is that you need to spend more time figuring out ways to get people to either get your work viewed by people on these well-trafficked sites, or a way to funnel people from these traffic sites to your own site, which seems like a much more difficult task these days.
Yeah. Yeah, well, you can also funnel people to your Twitter feed and use Twitter to funnel them to a product. You don't necessarily have to get them to a web page these days. Like if you've ever seen...
Well, that's my point. Yeah.
Yeah. It's one of those things that came up, market funneling techniques were a big thing in the early internet years. You still see to this day the 6 pages long, gigantic images with very little text websites for products where as you're scrolling through, you'll see, here's one feature, here's another, here's close-up pictures of the product. These are all things that are trying to funnel you at the very end of that page to a link after it's tried to convince you that this is worth buying. That, now here's the link, here's where you can go buy it, and then there'll usually be like 2 or 3 other funneling links. If you're not convinced that you want to buy it by the end of that first page, you'll often see at the bottom, check out the specs for this device or whatever it is they're selling. I'm going to use say computers or something because I look at a lot of computer stuff. So at the bottom of the page, they'll have a link. You can go buy it right now, but they'll also have a link. Check out some of the specs for this device, and then you can click on that and really get into the nitty-gritty of it. So now you've been funneled as a consumer to the bottom of that page. And if you're one of the people that really gets into the hardware for a computer, there is a link that's going to show you exactly what this machine can do from the technological standpoint. So now you're being funneled as a tech head to this part, which is going to be another gigantic page that is going to explain all of these things to you. And at the bottom of the page, there's going to be that link again to sell to you. This might sound like a very convoluted process to go through, especially if you're trying to sell people books. This is something that works in marketing. And it's something that if your number 1 or even number 2 goal is to make money selling some books, you're probably going to, if not want to learn this stuff and do this stuff, you're going to want to hire someone who is capable of doing these things. We both listen to a podcaster and historian and writer called Tom Woods.
Yes.
And he's very big into marketing techniques. And, I go to his webpage and he's got the pop-ups and everything that I hate, but he talks about it on his podcast a lot. He'll go into detail about how these marketing techniques work and how the email pop-up, sign up for the newsletter or whatever here, these things actually work. People do it. I have to be like a very aberrant case because it immediately turns me off when I see things like that. I lose a lot of interest. Like if I don't know going into it that I like the person that's selling me the product, half the time I navigate away from pages that do that. I am in the very small minority. Most people, it's like, ooh, I went to this webpage. It looked interesting. Here's a pop-up for a newsletter. Yeah, sure, I'll sign up. You sign up. You're on an email list. The person who has the product now can send you regular emails where...
Well, I mean, we're kind of getting a far afield here, aren't we? Like, we're not...
I'm talking about marketing. We'll get back to dead internet theory in just a second, but I just wanted to go through 2 examples of things that people do that work. Because a lot of people, when they first start doing this stuff, they look at the marketing side they kind of don't get too into it at first. They think to themselves, oh, well, I'm going to make this really great thing, and because it's really great, it will sell. And that's never the case. It's very rare that you make an incredible thing and it just finds an audience. It's an important part of selling the thing that you dig up the audience yourself. You kind of want to know who's going to want to read it, where are those people, how do you get eyeballs in front of your product. And the dead internet theory, or at least the non everything's a bot version of dead internet theory, we bring this, I wanted to bring this up to kind of point out that, you have to work with the tools that you have in front of you. Twitter is a tool that can get you readership. There's multiple ways that you can get readers for your books. There's a lot of people who find success just in quantity. They write a lot of books, and eventually Amazon and a handful of people, start, someone reads one book, they like it, they read another one, they tell a friend about it, that person reads one. And if you've got 60 books on Amazon, you've got 2 or 3 people that read, say, 10 of them. Those people are going to mention to other readers, oh yeah, I read this book and it was pretty good. And since you have so much to read, you'll start to see more and more people will say, oh, I heard this book was good, I'll go read one of them. And if they like it, they're probably going to get 2 or 3 more of them. And if they really like it, they're probably going to read all of them. I mean, just think about your own experiences reading. When I read my first Terry Pratchett book, I was hooked, and I wanted to read every single thing he wrote. And every time he wrote a book after that, it was like the first day it was available, I wanted to be in the store buying that book.
Yeah.
Marketing works, and marketing itself hasn't changed, but the internet has changed so much that marketing certainly isn't as easy. You really have to put in the effort to use marketing techniques these days, because people aren't going to find you organically very easily anymore. The internet is just a wasteland, so with 1 million people congregated in one spot, it's harder to find that one gem, as opposed to everyone having their own individual website and word of mouth getting around. Because nobody word of mouths your Twitter page.
Right.
That all happens online. Someone shares your page, you get retweeted, you get a bunch of people liking it, and so it boosts it up and dropping it on people's news feeds. It's a different game than it was 10 years ago. And you have to be aware of how the internet has changed to keep up with it. So I've kind of been just, rambling about my thoughts on that. Is there anything you want to say about that?
Well, what I was going to say is that people... So part of why I think this dead internet theory gets traction is because people make the mistake of assuming that their peers are their audience. So, for example, on Twitter, you and I both follow a bunch of different authors. But those people are authors, not readers. And so they're not actually they're our peers, but they're not our audience. And so this is a mistake, I think, that a lot of people make. And because they make this mistake, things look a lot emptier to them than they really are. Because what they're doing is they're asking people who don't do what they want them to do a thing. They're asking writers to read, not asking readers to read. And so, there's a little bit of crossover here and there. There's what would you call it? The various booktubes or book talks or whatever you call them, where you might have someone who writes reviews, maybe writes their own fiction or writes articles about fiction, and also reviews stuff for the purposes of people to read. But this is true in a lot of cases. There are people who make video games, I'm sure, who follow a bunch of other people who make video games on Twitter and are disappointed when their links to their new video game, don't get a lot of traction among that group. But that's because they're talking to their peers and not their audience with that attempt at, it's basically an advertisement, just one that's targeted very wrong. So, the centralization is one problem that makes the internet seem, because you'll get a flood of comments that seems, unreadable, right? You can scroll through Twitter endlessly, and you'll just keep getting more and more and more and more stuff. And, every comment, every post, every tweet that gets posted gets, 1 or 2 comments by bots. Usually you can see that this has happened because if you click on a tweet and actually look at it up close, it says, oh, by the way, do you want to look at the other comments that aren't shown here? And usually what that is going to be a bot of some sort. So, part of the problem is that people are using the same, Twitter profile to appeal to their peers as they used to appeal to their audiences. Some people kind of figure this out and start advertising to readers, but it's much harder to figure out who's a reader because the readers aren't posting, the readers are reading. So anyway, it's just one of those things where you can trick yourself into believing that things are a lot emptier than they are because your message isn't targeted to who wants to hear it. It's targeted to other people that you want to talk to, which is different things, right?
Yeah, and the internet isn't actually dead. I mean, there are still writer forums. They have been dying off a lot, but there's still some that are very large communities. And again, like I think we've talked about this before, where you join a writers forum and you might be able to get people to give you advice or get some beta readers or things, but really you need to be somewhere where the readers are. Even a writing forum isn't going to do too much for you. Like, you could probably do a decent job of finding an audience on a fanfic forum. And don't write fanfics, write your own stuff. And, if people actually want to sit back and read something and they come across yours, they people might read your work thinking that they're about to read some fan fiction for something they've never heard of. And then they find they like it, and bam, you've got a reader who's interested in what you're reading. And then you can, you can build an audience that way. There's definitely cases of authors that have built audiences by joining these communities and just sharing stories with them. The internet isn't really dead. It's just that everyone congregates in one area, and you have to be the cowboy that wanders outside sometimes to see what's not on Twitter. Most people have kind of fallen into this internet is only for shopping mentality. Or, like I go to Twitter, I'm not really trying to sell my books on Twitter. I post links occasionally, but I'm just there for fun. I'm there to see what other people have. I'm there to see if I can find cool things, and I'm there to share things with people I know and occasionally people I don't. And occasionally to get into arguments with people. But if I was going to go straight up advertising for my books, I would create an entirely new account, and I would focus on finding people who actually want to read books. I do follow at least 30 other authors, and at least 7 or 8 authors in that circle follow me back. Yeah. And I know that they're too busy writing their stuff. I'm not going to bother them and be like, hey, read my book. We're all aware of each other's books. We've seen each other's links here and there. And a lot of times a writer will post something like, hey, what are you working on right now? And people will kind of dive in for the fun of it and show what they're working on. I suspect that the majority of people that do that are thinking that they're going to sell some books that way. But again, these are other writers. If I'm working on something and someone shares a link to a book, maybe 2 times in the past year, I've actually bought a book from another writer that posted a link somewhere. There's that whole trap that people will fall into where, oh, well, we have to all support each other. 5 writers supporting each other doesn't do anything. You want an audience that actually wants to read your content.
Right.
Like the 4 other writers in that group aren't going to support you when they're trying to support themselves with their writing. There's still a ton of resources out there for educational purposes and helping you learn to market. There's still websites that are standalone where you can learn a lot of things. It's just that they don't show up in Google searches very easily. The top searches usually end up being some kind of like a Reddit post. You search for information on something, and the first 3 things that come back are Reddit posts that supposedly have the answer, and then you click on them, and it's someone asking the question, but nobody has answered it yet.
Right. Well, there's a lot of that, too, because it's become... Well, we mentioned this before, I think, but it's become much harder to have an answer to a question because software versions are changing so much and so drastically that, for instance, my answer as to what fixes a problem in software X 6 months ago might be completely different today because, versions have changed and they changed that part of the UI. They put that in a different menu, things like that.
Yeah, especially.
This is another thing that helps make the internet seem empty and dead, is that there's answers that aren't. It's not just that there's answers that don't work, because you'll find those all the time, but there are answers that are marked as this solved my problem that no longer solve the problem.
Yeah. And Reddit is probably the biggest culprit for that. It is worth noting, this is just my own personal observation. A lot of us, especially if we're writers or readers, a lot of us look for our information and answers on the internet in the form of text, or maybe a combination of text and pictures. A large part of the answering questions on the internet has moved to YouTube and similar places.
Well,
largely
so it's funny.
YouTube.
It's funny that you mentioned this because I had this situation crop up last weekend actually. My office chair broke. I had a spare one, but I wasn't using it because it had this issue where it wouldn't hold how reclined it was. Like if you leaned back at all, it would just kind of lean back with you. And I couldn't figure out how to fix that. And it's funny because I looked around for a text answer for perhaps an hour or something like that and found nothing particularly meaningful. I found a bunch of the same usual AI-generated articles that are like, if your chair needs this, then you need to buy parts for your chair. It's like, no, that's not. Anyway, what terminated the search was that I found a video in, I think it was Hindi, with no translation. It was just some guy talking in Hindi and showing how to like fix various parts of this chair. And I saw in the video that one of the parts that he was messing with looked like the part that I had taken apart my chair to get at. And he's like, this is what you do for this. I'm like, oh. And so like I didn't understand a word he was saying, but he still like showed me where this nut was and showed me that you have to take the cover off of it because companies these days make things in such a way that you can't user fix them, or that the user fixing things are hidden. And so I had to take a plastic cover off of a nut and then tighten a nut. But that solved the problem. But it was a very weird experience to like have this video in a language I know not a word of, and being like, I think this might solve the problem? Question mark.
You're sitting there watching two hands working, and it's just like hobble a bobble a beeble, beeble a bobble a booble bobble, and now we're canceled by people that speak Hindi. But aside from that, it's like a lot of fixing things has moved to video formats, and the majority of the things that you want to fix, you've got to look at YouTube now. And I've never really liked using videos to learn how to fix things. I work great if I can print out a paper that has the instructions, or if I can see a few. I don't even really like using pictures online, but if I have to, I will. Mm-hmm. Just like a text file that tells me how to fix something is usually good enough. But most people seem to want to have a video, even if it means that, they're not paying for YouTube Premium. So they've got to sit through a commercial, and then they've got to sit through 10 minutes of the guy that's fixing it telling you why he bought it and how his divorce is going. And then you get 2 more commercials before he actually gets to the point where he's like, and then you just twist this nut and it's fixed. People seem to enjoy that. And I can actually recommend, if you want a decent way to build an audience for your writing, anytime something of yours breaks and you manage to figure out how to fix it, make a video showing other people how to fix it. And do this 3 or 4 times, and if you start to get people watching your videos and saying, hey, that really helped, thanks for showing me that, start making videos where at the end of the videos, or even at the beginning, you pitch your books. Be like, hey, I'm making this video, yada, yada, yada. Also, just a way that I support myself, yada, 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 something in Hindi. Here's a book that I wrote if you're interested in any kind of reading. And then go on to the fixing of the thing. That's how a lot of people do things these days, and how a lot of people build audiences to sell their products to.
Yeah.
It's a YouTube world these days, as unfortunate as that sounds. The biggest audiences are there, the biggest money makers are there. I mean, if you want to really look at the people that are making tons of money selling products, or even just making tons of money, like we have YouTube millionaires, and while YouTube isn't quite the place that it used to be, you can't become like the 9-digit millionaires that YouTube used to have. You can still make a pretty penny off of YouTube if you manage to build an audience and you have content that people regularly want to see. It is not a slog. What's the word I'm looking for? It is. You really got to. Yeah, you've got to hustle. You've got to do that grind. I am not one of those people that wants to do video stuff. It doesn't appeal to me enough. I kind of want to, just because it's it is fun, but I'd rather write, and so to me the grind would feel like torture. It's one of those things where I've weighed it back and forth in my mind several times, and I almost feel stupid for not doing it. But there's some people that it's meant for, and some people that it's not. I don't think I'm much of a YouTube content creation person, even though I do it once in a while.
Once in a while.
Yeah. So it's it can be hard if it's not something that you want to do, or if it's not something that you. I mean, like any job, you're going to have things that you like doing better than others. I've found a comfort zone working at a job that I absolutely hate, putting boxes on shelves for a company that lets me afford to do the things I want to do, buy the things I want to buy, and write stories without having to worry about starving next week. There's a lot of people out there that they try to rely on something that isn't making them regular money, and it kind of takes the fun out of doing the thing they love. I have never lost interest in my writing. I feel like if I was writing for pennies, like if I was trying to make money regularly sending in short stories to magazines to get the occasional $200 while working a crappy part-time job, I would probably be disillusioned and not care too much about writing anymore. But I work full-time, and in my free time, I crank out a couple paragraphs and occasionally put out, a short story or a novella or a book, and that, to me, is good enough. Now, if you really want to supercharge it, you got to do things like learning all the marketing techniques, really putting in the hours to get good at it, and, doing the hustle, getting on YouTube and Twitter and things, and really shilling everything you have. There are people who are really built for doing that, and it's not even necessarily that it's hard. It's just a lot of work.
Yeah.
I have probably read enough books and been to enough seminars and paid for enough programs to where I can do it. I don't think I have the mentality for it. My other thoughts on the internet being dead, though, is I kind of agree with you where I don't actually think the internet is dead. I think a lot of things that were once cool have fallen out of use to the point that most of them probably won't be around for very long, if they're even still there.
Yeah.
I mean, we're definitely not living in a GeoCities world anymore where people have their personal websites up with all the things they love, which was the golden era. I mean, nothing was better than discovering new things because you went to some rando's website who happened to like the same anime you liked, and the next thing you know, you're looking up like new PC technology that this person recommended, completely off of out of left field, not related to the content that is the main thing on their webpage. Because people used to do that. People used to make a web page, and it's like, hey, I'm a really big fan of this. I'm going to tell you everything about it. Here's another thing that I kind of like. And so you get caught up in reading someone who maybe they write in an entertaining way, or maybe you just are really interested in what it is they're talking about.
Yeah.
And then you find a new topic on their page, and then you go down that rabbit hole. I think it's one of the reasons that conspiracy theories seem to become more prominent to begin with, is that it's one of the last things on the internet that you can do the whole rabbit hole thing with.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Well, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say the prevalence and persistence and attempts to appear human by bots also lends a lot of credence to the theory, right? You can go on Twitter or Facebook or Amazon or whatever, and you will find a bunch of stuff that has been created by bots trying to get you to go to this website or get you to sell a thing or buy a thing or whatever. And, it's one thing to use tools to help create things a little quickly. It's another thing to not curate those results at all. And so you end up with this mishmash of inhuman sounding copy and you just rolling with it with the hope that using this shotgun method that you eventually get people to click on your malicious link or whatever. The more bots that you see, the more the dead internet theory seems true, just because it seems like the bots outnumber people. And that might be, I mean, it might be a fact that the bots outnumber people because bots are cheaper, easier, and faster to make than people.
Yeah, and Twitter's not exactly free of bots either. I mean, even 10
No,
years
that's
ago...
what I'm saying. Twitter might be more bots than people. Like, we don't know.
Yeah. Oh, Twitter is almost certainly more bots than people. I mean, like, even 10 years ago, I would be subscribed to like 3 people and that I didn't even know were bots until I started getting certain replies back, and then I was like, oh wait, I'm following a bot. Some of them were fun. Like I remember a lot of Toho bots that I used to follow just because they would respond to certain words that if I posted something with a certain phrase or a certain word, I would get an automated response from them.
Huh.
I got attacked.
Like what? Tell me more.
I got attacked by Mei Ling constantly.
I see.
Like she would pop up when I was talking about fights or something. She would pop up and threaten me on Twitter. It was great.
Well, that might not be a bot. That might just be a person whose first language is not English, and
because it was
a bot to.
It would be the same phrase every time. It would pop up at certain terms. It was and it actually said it was a bot in the in the description for that one. So yeah, there were a lot of Toho bots. I don't know if they survived any of the bot purging, but they were kind of cool to follow.
Fair enough.
Bots can be fun too. I mean, we live in a world that
bots can be fun, right? One of the early there's that psychological psychological program that takes whatever you say to it and kind of phrases it back to you as a question. That was one of the early bots, right? That was an early bot that was used to kind of let you psychoanalyze yourself a little bit.
What, Dr. Spatzo? I
don't know what it was called, but that sounds
the
like
old MS-DOS one.
Well, there were a bunch of different varieties of it, but I mean, it would depend on what platform you were on. I saw it in... There was a game called Life and Death 2 that had a copy of that game, a copy of that program tucked away in one of the side areas of the game. So, you know.
Yeah, there were dozens, maybe hundreds of those back in like the 80s and 90s on old computers. I remember we had one on the Commodore 64 called Mother-in-Law that it was one that would... You were someone who married someone's daughter and you were talking to the mother-in-law, right. And she was programmed to kind of not like you, and so anything you said to her, she was met with some kind of suspicion, or she would denigrate several of the things you said.
Yeah,
it was fun. Me and my brother got hours of fun out of that, and I vaguely remember some of the phrases, but there was like a face that would appear on the screen, and it would move over the text as the text was typing out.
Yeah,
and if you swore at her, she would go red in the face and get really angry at you. So you weren't supposed to swear in that one.
Right. I mean, it was a different time.
Yeah. So these things have existed for a long time, and the technology for them has gotten better to the point where people are constantly trying to make it more and more realistic, more like you're talking to an actual human being.
Well, that's what the recent, ChatGPT style AI boom has been. It's been the attempt to make, content from your prompts, whatever, whether it's just something you said or something that you ask that sounds human-ish. And it's just an evolution of making bots more human, which people are always going to try to do because there's a lot of psychological and monetary incentives to doing so.
Yeah, and
you're never going to be rid of it.
Oh, of course not. It's like you're not. It's a genie that's not going back in the bottle. A lot of people hate it, and a lot of people wish they could get rid of it. But ultimately, what's really going to happen is people are going to see the value in using this to sell people things. As most people are aware, the majority of people aren't going to care about the moral questions of whether these computers should be copying a bunch of other people's artwork to come up with their own. Whether you love AI art generators or not, they're not going to go away because the majority of people aren't going to care, about the artist's opinion on them. Or even if they do, they're not going to... A lot of people aren't going to not use this stuff just because artists don't like it. Even artists that don't like it use it. I mean, a lot of artists do see the value in having something that they can use as a starting point to then create their own art. I mean, I've seen several artists that are like, yeah, I put in a prompt to try and just get something generated to come back to me, and I look at it and like, I want to draw something similar to that, and then I draw my own thing. And I think most artists don't have a problem with that kind of use with it. And I understand where a lot of artists are coming from, where they feel like, oh, well, the really good art that human beings are producing is being scraped by the internet to create new art using machines.
Well, we've had this conversation before. So.
Yeah, we have. We don't have to go back into this. But, you know, the technology is there. People are going to use it. I don't know what to say.
People are always going to try to automate things because automating makes a large job into a much smaller job. And, you know, but the point is not to focus on the fact that there are bots, but to focus on the fact that there are people, right? That's what ultimately disproves the dead internet theory, is that you can find people on Twitter that you've met and talked with, but that you don't have, like, that they're not your neighbor, right? But from a writing perspective, I guess the point that I'd like to get across here is that if you're not getting engagement with what you're doing, it may be that you're aiming at the wrong audience. So because social media has become so important and so central in many people's daily lives, you need to make a separation between your peer group and your customer group, because if you don't do that, you're going to end up discovering that you either are talking about writing with people who don't write, or talking about books that you want people to read with people who don't read. So, there's a lot of ways to make this mistake and trick yourself into believing that there's nobody there to talk to, when what you're doing is you're talking about either the wrong topic or you're talking to the wrong person about that topic.
Yeah, and a way to think of it is, if you had been trying to sell books during the time at which you needed to have your own personal webpage to really stand out, there were certain marketing tricks that you had to do that would, funnel an audience your way, or find you an audience, or get people in front of the product.
Yeah.
Those same techniques will still work on social media. You just have to look at it from the standpoint of, okay, so I'm in this sphere on social media. This is where I have to work. So I have to adopt those skills and techniques to how I get people to look at my product on Twitter. And there's not just one surefire method. I mean, ideally you want to use multiple marketing techniques to get through to as many people as possible, up to and including even paying for advertising on Twitter, or paying someone to market your stuff. Yeah. One of the nice things about, no matter how much they try to keep you on Twitter, it's really just looking at it from the perspective of, oh, well, I mean, the readers are going to be on Twitter too. If you market your stuff somewhere else, you can still advertise that you're on Twitter when you advertise in other places.
Right.
At this stage in time, Facebook is not preventing people from telling people that they also have a Twitter account. So you can direct people to your most used, or even your only used, social media from other social media. It's not, even if you don't use Facebook, it doesn't hurt to have an account there for the sole purpose of directing people to your Twitter account.
Or your blog, or whatever.
Yeah. Facebook might try to stop you at some point from telling people, from like linking to Twitter or telling people to go to Twitter. They're not going to stop you from giving them money to tell people to go to Twitter. And if they do, right. Shame on them. I mean, it's money.
Yeah, I mean, these are all different strategic questions of how much Facebook wants to try to set itself up to be an adversary to Twitter. That's going to depend on that's going to depend on a bunch of stuff that we're not worried about at this point for the purposes of this podcast. But the point is that the internet can really seem empty, but often if it seems empty, it's because you're aiming in the wrong direction. That's kind of the point that I wanted to get across. And that's not saying that you shouldn't talk with your peers on the internet either. But what it is saying is that if you want engagement for topic X, you need people who are interested in topic X. And making that mistake can make you feel like it is an empty internet. But if you have a little bit of tenacity and you kind of get outside your comfort zone with who you're, who the people you're following, kind of thing, you can actually have some pretty decent success.
Yeah, and you don't want to you don't want to avoid other writers just because they're not going to buy your books or read your stuff.
Like I said, there's a difference between peers and customers.
Yeah.
And your peers are the people that you want to talk with, honestly, right? Like they're the people that you want to say, "Hey,
Well, you've got two people, right? You got two writers, and one of them is probably going to be doing a better job than the other. And so if this is one of your peers, you say, "Hey, how did you do that?" Most people are more than happy to, share their success stories with you and explain how they did things. There's the occasional person that guards jealously all of their secrets, and it's pointless to do so because whatever they did to sell their books, other people have done too. If they're not going to give you the information, someone else will. But for the most part, if you're in a group of writers and someone has some success with something and you want to know how to do what they did, it's very likely they will share that information with you.
Yeah, pretty much.
There's also, I mean, we don't want to get too off track again. I've gone on 3 tangents about marketing now, but
yeah, let's avoid more. We're not trying to talk about marketing here because that would be a separate episode that we can definitely do. But we just wanted to have a little fun with this dead internet theory. And you know what? There's also one other thing I want to say. You can help fight against this perception of a dead internet by having your own website that isn't part of
oh yeah, definitely,
like the big four. So like there are plenty of free places to get like just a text blog with images and stuff, or start a free account on like a video thing and maybe just record. You don't have to record your face, right? A lot of people don't like to do that, but you can record your voice and put it over an image or something like that, or like a pan over an image or something like that, and you can make videos that way. I mean, it's up to us as human beings to make the internet seem like it's got people on it and not just bots. And so, the thing I'd like to, I guess, leave the audience with is you can make the internet seem more alive by being more alive on the internet. And that means less passive scrolling and more, hey, here's a comment. And even if the comment is just like, oh yeah, this is kind of cool, or, what the hell are you talking about? Those are both things that, if done right, and done in a way that doesn't sound like you are yourself a bot, try not to sound like you're a bot yourself, and then you can make the internet seem less dead.
Yeah, and another thing that you can do in that similar vein, we're talking about the idea that the internet can at times feel like there's not really much outside of Twitter and Google and Facebook and
right.
But there are other people out there that are building new things that may or may not work. But the important thing to remember, a lot of people will look at a new social media site or a new video site, and they'll be like, well, I mean, how are they ever going to compete with Facebook? How are they ever going to compete with YouTube? How are they ever going to compete with Twitter? Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube will not be around forever. They are not cemented in history as the be-all, end-all of everything that's going to happen. 20 years ago, everyone was on MySpace. That's gone completely. And
pretty much.
Facebook completely destroyed that. And
does
now,
MySpace even resolve anymore?
I think it does. I think it for a while it turned into a place where a lot of people were putting their music projects up, and I don't know if it ever...
It exists. It still exists, but it looks like it's all music stuff now, yeah.
Yeah, Facebook is almost getting there. Facebook is probably going to be like MySpace within the next 5 to 10 years because, first off, they had the abysmal performance of that whole meta thing. Nobody cared about that, and it's pretty much dead in the water. But Facebook as a social media site is going to be like MySpace is now, if that, within 5 to 10 years, just because there's nothing more they can do with it. They haven't been able to find ways to really profit from Facebook at this point. And
well, so I'm actually looking at this real quick. And did you know that there's a bunch of people that have a bunch of different groups that have decided to try and preserve a bunch of old GeoCities websites in their original forms?
Yeah. Yeah, there's a ton of that. So I think someone backed up all of GeoCities at one point before it died.
Yeah. So it died in 2019, like, finally.
Okay,
And,
no, I'm thinking like 2010. Someone made a backup of it, I think, and so
right.
everything for up to 2010 is saved somewhere.
Well, there's the GeoCities Gallery, a restorative land project, a restored visual galaxy of the gallery of the archived GeoCities sites, sorted by neighborhood. Sites with sound icon may have embedded MIDI and WAV files. Some sites may contain objectionable content. Yada yada. Yeah, it's funny. I can go to College Park, the bookstore, and
Yeah, anyone 30 or younger, go check out some of this old GeoCities stuff and see what the internet was like when it started. It was a blast.
apparently there's a thing called NeoCities. Create your own free website with unlimited creativity and zero ads. I wonder how that works.
Well, so one of the things I wanted to point out about this
That's
whole
cute.
social media stuff nothing is going to last forever.
Right.
So,
people said each of these things would last forever and was going to be the big thing forever and was going to have a monopoly that lasted until eternity. And this has happened multiple times in just the last, say 35 years, where the internet has been really a thing that the general public has used. So it's one of those things where, these big companies will eventually become so sclerotic that they will either dwindle or fail completely, and
or
something
collapse
else
under
will
their
pop
own
up
weight.
Yes, basically.
But even before that happens, there's going to be people out there trying new things. Do not be afraid to experiment. I would say avoid locking yourself into contractual obligations. But,
Yeah.
There's social media sites all over the place out there that people are experimenting with. Try new things. You never know if you're going to be one of the lucky people that is on something that takes off, and all of a sudden you have a gigantic audience out of nowhere. That kind of
Right.
thing can happen too. It doesn't happen to many people, but, people who were in early on Facebook and YouTube and Twitter, that's where a lot of the success was. So you can't necessarily predict where that's going to happen, but I can tell you that it's definitely going to happen at some point. There's going to be a paradigm shift somewhere. And if you're one of the people that's experimenting with different things, it might be a boon for you.
Yep.
Definitely don't get too many contractual obligations, though. There was that whole story with Webtoons recently where they had these really crappy contracts and someone leaked some of the content for them, and other people were like, yeah, this is kind of where they're going, and they just weren't good for the people. It was literally, we can take your IP at any time and you won't get any money for anything we produce with it.
Right.
Which is just like, why would anyone sign that for a start? Yeah, never take a contract unless you really, really think you understand contract law. And even then, I would say get a lawyer before you sign anything. Make sure a lawyer looks things over.
Yeah.
And make sure the lawyer's not incompetent.
Yes, that also helps.
Okay, so more to the point, know someone who's not incompetent. Know someone who you think is actually an intelligent human being and can look at something and be like, okay, this is what you need to ask your lawyer about this.
Right.
9 times out of 10, it's better to know someone that's competent than to hope you get a competent lawyer.
Right.
And also be able to tell the difference between people that are competent and people you think are competent.
Yeah, that's a little harder.
Yeah.
But yeah, definitely a thing.
But yeah, experiment, see what works for you. I'm not going to tell people to try every little thing, because I think a lot of artists and writers both get caught up in trying everything and then feeling like a miserable failure because they didn't devote enough time to any one thing.
Right.
Bare bones basics. If you want to be a writer, write, and either, write lots of stuff. Just write lots of stuff and put it out there, and, that's one thing you can do. Don't completely neglect the marketing side. Don't completely neglect any of the things you have to do if you actually want to sell stuff. But don't completely stop your writing and then spend, tons of money and tons of time trying to figure out how to get a handful of people to look at one thing that you did.
Yeah.
It can be a fool's errand. Is there anything else
Well,
we have to say about that? Anything else we want to say about dead internet theory?
Well, I mean, I think we've said what we need to say. The internet is not dead. We are two people who are on the internet, and we know each other in real life, and we have seen each other and talked to each other. And we're both on the internet, and you can find us.
And we're totally not just a collection of digital bits that are creating random podcasts with random topics about writing.
I mean, we might be a collection of digital bits. I don't know what your perspective is on the illusionism of free will or not. I mean, like, you probably could...
if we're going to go there...
Could express us as bits, but we have an organic basis at this point.
Yeah, if we're going to go there...
And that's what counts.
I'm going to recommend that anyone who thought we were actually going to dive into the full dead internet theory topic, go look it up. It's a fascinating read.
Okay, so here's the thing I'm going to say before we go. Looking up these kind of weird internet conspiracy rabbit holes is a great way to get fodder and ideas for stories. And because all of these like internet conspiracy things are just like they're kind of ethereal. There's not really anybody that has a copyright on them. There's a bunch of different people writing a bunch of different random stuff about it. You can't really be encroaching on someone else's idea. What you can do is you can take their idea, take an idea that you hear, mold it into something that is your own, and you can make interesting ideas about this. So I wrote the PAEAN Project because I kept hearing about people who were like moon landing skeptics, and I'm like, yeah. And the PAEAN Project is not designed to placate moon landing skeptics, but it is a fun story that I came up with that kind of has the premise has as its premise like, well, what if something really bad happened to anyone that approached the moon? And that was my story. So, you can look at these weird rabbit holes and you can find all the random crazy stuff that you want, and you can use it to kickstart your own ideas for writing as well. And the more you write, the more you personally write and as a human make, the less dead the internet will seem.
That is largely exactly what I was going to say, so I guess I don't really have much to add to that. I can give an example, a recent example
Sure.
I came across, though.
Absolutely.
I have several conspiracy theory based things that I put in a couple of stories. Like I'm doing one where I'm splitting the Earth into 3 dimensions, one of which has a flat Earth, just for kicks.
Yeah.
But that's like my own personal examples are fun and extensive, and I don't want to get too much further into them. There is a show I watched recently. It's called Resident Alien. And this show is just chock full of references to things that you would find on, like if you watched Ancient Aliens on the History Channel, or Discovery, or whatever it is, or they actually made a moon landing joke where someone said something about the moon landing in front of this guy that's disguised as a human. He's an alien, and like one of the people that's with him knows he's an alien, and he says something about, oh well, that's nonsense. They did land on the moon. They just weren't the ones that came back. So a lot of good jokes about alien things like that. And they just offhand mentioned a few things that anyone that really got into the ancient alien conspiracy stuff would recognize.
Right.
Like, they mentioned the Anunnaki. They talk about the Greys and the reptilians and the mantids, all sorts of races that came out of the ancient alien craze. And this is all stuff that, it became fodder for what was... I think it's an okay show. I don't think it's the best television, but comparatively to what we get nowadays, it was one of the better things I saw come out of television.
Yeah.
They don't...
The main character is the guy from Firefly. The guy that played Wash in Firefly, right?
I don't remember the people from Firefly. It's been too long since I've seen it. I think that guy's in it. I don't think he's the main actor. The main actor is like, what was it? Alan or Alex something...
Alan Tudyk.
Was that the Firefly guy?
That's the guy who plays Wash in Firefly.
Okay. Yeah, he does a good job in this show. He's supposed to be playing a fish out of water alien, and he talks really funny for all of his dialogue. It's actually kind of weird though, because when he's the one on the screen doing the dialogue, he talks in one way that's like really like if you were talking to this person in a cafe, you would think there was either something wrong with them or he was an alien.
Sure.
there when he's actually, I don't think it's him that's in the suit, the alien suit, when they're showing what he really looks like.
Yeah.
He has the same voice, but he talks more normally when that's the case. So
Okay.
it's just like one weird discrepancy. But it is a pretty fun show. It does have its modern day problems where like, do you remember when they wanted when they wanted to do the whole, hey, there's nothing wrong with women thing in movies in the 80s? It would be something like, some guy would be like, hey, toots, and then he'd, get a fist to the face and be like, oh, you don't mess with that girl. She ain't playing around. There was an entire scene in this show, and there's several, like, fourth wave feminist scenes in this show that people need to learn how to either do these better or that they just detract from the viewing. It was like 5 minutes long of, like, the main actress explaining to the main actor, who is an alien, who comes from a race of people who have no real sympathy and don't really have emotions.
Yeah.
And it's one of them long speeches that ends with her saying, sometimes you just need to sit down, shut up, and listen. Which, sticking feminist slogans into television is probably the worst part. Like, that scene probably wouldn't have bothered me at all if it had not been done with a known slogan I've seen in several other television shows. Just like, at least have the creativity to word it a different way and make it a meaningful scene. Don't just make it her telling this alien that, had earlier described in like 10 episodes previous, how after he mated, the female he mated with exploded into 1,000 eggs that hatched, and his children run off, and he never really has any emotional attachment to any of them. It's like, I don't think that's a race that cares much about feminism. I don't think, I don't think there's much male or female empowerment in such a race. I think they just breed and survive like insects. It's kind of the takeaway you get.
Yeah.
But, they didn't even do it in a way like, look, on our planet, we tend to have more sympathy and empathy for people. And sometimes it really doesn't make you feel like a good person if you're talked down to, especially if, like, men don't really talk down to their women the way that you were talking down to me just now. He wasn't even doing anything that was like against one specific gender. It was just, he didn't listen to something a woman said, and this set her off. This is bad writing. You have to make the scenes mean something, because from everything that happened in that scene, it took 5 minutes out of the show where I would rather be seeing cool alien stuff and people solving problems. And it was pretty much trying to beat me over the head with a message that I don't need, because I'm not like, with the exception of people that try to give me speeches like that, I don't go out running out and talking down to people like they were insinuating. So I guess if we can end on any positive message, if you're an alien, make sure you beat your women, and
or at least cause them to explode.
Yeah, at least cause them to explode. And if you're human, maybe less so, at least half the time.
A little less so, a little bit.
Yeah. So now that we're
moderation.
Now that we're canceled,
moderation is important.
Now that we're canceled by half the human race.
Yes.
We had to get one more in there. We're also canceled by aliens,
obviously,
or at least any aliens that have emotions. There's probably like the old Indian on the side of the road equivalent of a gray alien with a teardrop coming out of its eye after that. But
yes,
I'm cool with that because the moon is made of cheese and you can't have it.
That's true.
But yeah, use those fun conspiracy things as fodder for stories, even if you don't buy into any of them. They're fun to dive into.
Oh, yeah.
If you treat it like fiction, some of it is really, really fun.
Sure,
With the possible exception of the flat earth stuff, I just don't get anything that those people are saying. None of it makes sense.
No, it doesn't.
And I know that the earth is flat because the earth is just Pac-Man physics, where if you go out one side, you come through the other side. That's why it appears round. So it's like, I'm not even arguing with them that the earth is flat. That's just how that works. But yeah, some of the theories for the earth being flat, absolutely insane.
Mm-hmm.
Still worth reading, maybe. I prefer.
I don't know.
I prefer the alien
it depends
stuff.
it depends on what you're into writing, right? But like, I guess the takeaway is, like, if that sounds like fun to you, then make some fun with it, and then do some writing based on it, and don't take yourself too seriously, and don't give up on using something to make good fiction because it's nutty, you know?
Yeah, I mean, that makes the best fiction.
But pretty much. Plus, especially if you really dislike a particular conspiracy theory, you can lambast it in that way, and if you're clever about it, it might actually be good.
Yeah, just don't turn it into one of them things that cudgels you, like a woman telling an alien that he should listen to.
The non-cudgeling is important.
Yeah.
Like subtlety and stuff like that is also is a big part of it. But anyway, let's call this here. We're gonna
have to change the title now that we've added that part at the end in about conspiracy theories, but
it'll be fine.
Yeah.
All right. Well, this has been the Wordy Pair. We have been talking about the dead internet theory as it pertains to writing, and kind of segued into a bunch of different random stuff. As always, I'm Rudy.
And I'm Justin.
And we will see you all next week. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening to the Wordy Pair Podcast. Our passion is all things writing, world building, and getting into the weird and wonderful world of fiction. We hope you enjoyed our unique takes. If you did, make sure to like, rate, review, and subscribe to get your weekly dose of writing weirdness. We'll be back soon, but in the meantime, hit us up on Twitter. For Rudy, it's @Rudolph_Cone. And for Justin, @Ninja Mouse Chew. See you next time on the Wordy Pair Podcast.